morning and welcome to Tina's Crafty Ink Spot. I'm Tina. Today I'm going to feature this card that I did for a very, very special friend and mentor. And my team and several of my customers thought it would be a good idea if I showed how I use the alcohol blends markers. I use them for almost all my medium. They're simple, they're fast for me, and I enjoy how they look. So for today's set, I got this set in the catalog and I kind of looked at it and went, But then I noticed in the bundle comes this really nice embossed corner. And you'll see on the card above that you saw, I did use this as the background on my card base. It's a very elegant set. It's one that's super simple to color if you're just learning how to use blends or watercolor pencils. So we're going to start off with that. My card base is a 4 1/4 by 11 and I scored it at 5 1/2. Before I fold this, I wanted to do my embossing with the corner embosser. I found the easiest way to get this to have a really nice sharp image or emboss on your cardstock, and I am using the extra thick white cardstock, Whisper White. It's a thicker card base. When I have a minimal layered card, I like using the thicker card base. I think it just holds up better. So when you do this embossing, and I did it, I'm going to be folding my card mountain in where my score line is. So I wanted my image on either or corners. So what I did use is I used my base platform, one plate, and my embossing mats, which you see I've been using a lot of. They're a little dirty, but I used both this one and it comes with another really thin one. You'll see these in below listed in my online store where you can get them. So you have your sandwich and lay my card base. And I simply picked whatever two corners I wanted. And I laid my emboss just a hair over the edge because it does have a slight line. And I didn't want that line on my card and I didn't want to miss. So you lay it like that. Put your top plate on and you run it through your Big Shot. Then and we have a runner. I ran it through my Big Shot 2 times. I liked a really sharp kind of embossed image. And then on your second one, you already see where your score line is. Just lay it up against the score line. Do your top plate. Run it through 2 more times. On this part right here is going to be embossed. So if you're running it through this way on your Big Shot, you can stop at the end of the embossing plate. That way you're not running what you've already embossed back through the Big Shot, which may smash your image a little. And through the miracle of film and the fact that my small workspace here by the camera doesn't fit my Big Shot, I've already got one made up. And if you look in the camera, it's a really nice, vivid emboss. Now the back side is what I want to be on the inside of my card. So we simply score it. I am a big believer of a bone folder. So there's our card base, and we will set that aside. For the image itself, I always use my Stamparatus for a couple reasons. It saves you if you accidentally misstamp something. You can just restamp it. So our image piece is 3 by 4. And if you look, I did want a little bit of an edge there, and you'll see it on the stamp. So when you line up your, I usually go to the middle of my Stamparatus, and once your magnet's on there, it's not going to go anywhere. And you see I broke my magnet, and my husband has now learned how to file these for me because I snapped them together. So on your Stamparatus, be careful that your magnets don't touch each other. They will break. But if you have a husband that's handy, they'll sand down the edge and you can still use your magnet. So on this one, you can see the small line and the gap here. So I wanted to just line up the very edge of the stamp on both corners. And in this light, you can see it quite well. Make it even. And I knew as soon as I started recording, the dogs would bark. They don't deal with closed doors, and I had to close the door to my she cave. When you're using the Stampin Blends, I would suggest I always use Memento. It is the only one I know of that won't bleed. So I would suggest using the Tuxedo Black Memento, and it's listed below in my online store. So you ink up your stamp. Just use a nice, firm, kind of go around it, firm pressure. And if you lift it, and that one stamped clearly and dark. If you have some light areas, simply re-ink it and do it again. I would suggest highly that you either hit your image with your heat tool before you start to color, or give it time to dry. So again, through film, we have a dry one. And I'm going to move this out of the way. When we do, and on the card, you also saw I did the bird, a butterfly, and added a popped-up flower on the card above. So I've already stamped those, but we will color them together. Let's start on the small ones, because then if you start on something small, and you won't be as intimidated when you start on your big one. So on the flower, let's start with this one. So what I do is I bring out an assortment of my colors. And I already know that I wanted some oranges and yellows and things on my flower. So let's go ahead and grab some, we'll grab some pumpkin pie. And let's go ahead and grab the Daffodil Delights. And we'll start on this flower. Now everybody, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit so that you can see this. Hopefully I can zoom in on this. There we go. And I'll move my card up so you can see. I might have to zoom out just a little bit. Apologies, my system here is not as user-friendly as I would like it to be. Now everybody colors with their alcohol markers differently. I'm the type that goes from dark to light. So I'm going to start with my darkest color. And because I've got such a small area, on your blend you're going to have two different tips. I call it a feather tip and a fine. They might even name them differently. But I'm going to start with my feather tip. I have more control with my feather tip. So I'm going to pick my darkest area. And when you're looking at your image, you're going to try to think of where your shadows are going to be. So you know that your inside of your flower is going to have a little more shadows. So when you start with your blend marker, know that these will blend. So start on the inside of your line. If you need to go farther, until you get used to where it's going to bleed out, because it will bleed a little bit. So when I do it, I use a feather stroke. So I start at my darkest and I feather out. And when you do the feathering, you'll see that when you go to blend, the feathering just gives you a quicker blend. So I know I want my darkest areas down here at the bottom. So I'm going to hit it a couple times. I close my markers when in between because, one, I don't want to get the lids mixed up and grab the wrong color. Plus, it just saves on them drying out. So now we're going to take the lighter color of the pumpkin pie. And again, I want to take my feather edge. And when you go into it, go all the way in if you want and drag it out. Go all the way. It's not going to take away your dark color. All it's going to do is blend it out. And just feather it some more. And since I'm going to be adding some more colors to this, I'm just going to feather it a little ways. So the farther you go in and the more you drag out, the more your lines, whoops, and I messed up, but that's okay. It's not an exact science. You'll see that won't show. So I'm going to go right along the edges of where my last feather was and just pull it out a little bit. And it's going to blend. Now you're not always going to see it blending just instantly. As it dries, it also blends. So I wanted to add some little yellow highlight to this. So this one, I'm actually, oops, that's my Mango Melody. I apologize. I am going to use the Dark Daffodil Delight. And I'm going to take my feather edge again, and I'm going to go right at the edge of my other color and pull it out a little bit. Go to the edge of my flower. And I'm pulling some of the orange, so it's going to give it a little bit of another color where it just blends. Kind of like when you use alcohol inks or... So, see if I had a line? You know what? Go into it. Just go into all of it. It's just going to blend the colors together. If you get a little spot that you don't want ink, so I don't know if you can see that, I went out very lightly. You can take either end. This is the color lifter. Take this lifter and drag back in, right where your spot is. And you only need to hit it a couple times. As it dries, it has lifted the color. And I'll show you another way to use this as soon as we finish our flower. Now I realize that I want a little bit more dark. So you just keep blending those colors. As long as it's damp and wet, it's going to blend. So you can add more accents or pull that dark out a little bit. And I know I have a shadow there, so I'm just going to feather a little bit here. Now a lot of people will go light to dark. I just don't. I've never had luck at it. This way, I seem to have a little more control. If you have really stark lines and you want to bleed them out, go halfway back, pull it, and just feather it. So you're just going to get rid of those harsh lines. I'm going to go back in with my light Daffodil Delight, and I'm going to hit those lines again and just pull it out a little bit. And then if I want a little bit of light accent on the very tips of my flowers, I'm going to take my lifter, and all I'm going to do is barely tap that a couple times. And you'll see when it dries, it's going to lift a little bit of that color off there and give it a light accent. So now, I always keep my lifter closer. For the dove, you can leave him white, but I like to add a really light smoky slate. So for this, I'm going to use my fine tip point. And I know where my shadows are on my bird, so I'm going to go from my darkest spot and just add a little bit of feather of this. I want to go around his wing a little bit. He might have a little bit of shadow under his wing here. Or I'm just going to drag a little bit. Maybe a little under his chin. Looks a little stark right now, but watch. So we know he has a little bit of shadow on his wings. So I'm going to hit these little corner shadows. Kind of make a little V. See how to kind of shadow it? Now if you're just starting and you're a little bit slower, work in smaller spaces so that your ink stays wet and you can blend as you need to. So I'm going to have a little bit of shadow there. I just want to touch on his... And you barely need to touch the paper with your markers. It's going to pick it up really quick. So I know he has a little bit of shadow here on his feathers. Maybe a little here on the tip. Now the big trick is I'm going to go back in with my color lifter. I'm going to take my point here. Actually, I'm going to use my feather point. I have better luck with my feather. Right along the edges of where your color is, just hit it with your lifter a little bit. Now, there's not going to be an instant. You're going to notice it bleeding. Give it a minute and just hit these gray areas. So you're doing the same thing with this as you would if you were doing a dark and a light color. All I'm doing is getting rid of those harsh edges, and it'll give it a little bit of fade. So if you don't think it's hitting it quite, give it a second. Okay, I want mine a little lighter. So if you want, you can also, if you're not comfortable feathering, take the tip and go right at the edge. Just do a little bit of circling. And when you circle the edge of it, all you're doing is saturating the paper around it, which allows that harsh edge to bleed or blend, so to speak, and gives it more of a faded shadow. See, that one I went a little hard, but that's okay. If I have some real hard spots, just barely touch them. Doesn't take much. And there you go. You got your little bird. Got him a little dark right there, but you know what? I'm going to add a touch of gray right here to blend it in. And just touch my dark where I took too much away. It's okay, just barely touch it. And bring your darks back in. So there's no real right or wrong. Just play with it till you get the effect you want. When you play with your color lifter, you'll be able to be a little more, okay, it's going to do this, so I'll do this. Just play with them. You'll have a blast. I did 2 butterflies because on the card, I did a 3-dimensional butterfly without popping him up, and I'll show you how I did that. But what I want to do is I want my butterfly really colorful. So what I did is I've got, let's go with Highland Heather. This one's new. It's a beautiful purple. So I've got the light and the dark Highland Heather. Okay, say it really fast. Highland Heather. Okay, so I'm going to take my dark, and since this is a really small space, I'm going to take my fine tip. I got to get him in the direction I used to color. So I know I want my darkest right here. I'm just going to feather a little out there. I'm going to do them both at once because I'm a little bit faster than, but I would do one at a time until you're comfortable. You just keep playing with it. So I'm going to drag out my dark and give a little bit of fade. And I'm going to hit right on that line. And so we're hitting right about, I don't know, halfway in. And drag it out, and it's going to bleed that harsh line through, or blend it. I think I want to do a little bit of maybe some yellow highlight right here. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow right around there. I'm just tapping it. I'm actually with this, I'm just tapping the paper. And I've got color going down. And because I did yellow, when I add my blue, which I am using the dark and the light pool party, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the light pool party, because what I want to do is go into this yellow just a little. So I'm going to start and I'm going to pull my light blue into the yellow, which gives me the green when you pull in there. See how it just blends right in there, whatever colors you have. I always kind of wipe my tip off if I've gone into another color. Normally it doesn't do anything, but just in case I've condemned. And then I want some dark highlight right on the tips of his wings. So I'm just touching it with the pen, and since it's wet, it's automatically going to bleed in there. I see I forgot to paint my other guy here. So go into the purple, it's fine, and then right at the edge of my yellow. So it's going to give me a little bit of green. You'll see it blending. Then I'm going to take my dark again, and I'm just going to touch the tips of his wings. Let's see. If you want a little bit more dark accent, just touch it again. And you know what? We're going to add a little bit of pink to this guy. So let's grab, how about Dark Flirty Flamingo? And since I want a little bit lighter pink in the middle, I'm going to go with a light pink pirouette. So I'm going to take my small tip, and I'm just going to touch this corner and feather just a couple swipes. And it's going to give me that dark accent. And when I hit it with my light pink, I'm going to go from my line out. If you want, hit it in a circle. Do a little circle to blend the same way. See how I blended it? Okay, so we've got our 3 images there done. So put my markers back up here. Kind of out of my element here. I have usually my markers are all lined up on my workspace, but I'm over by my computer for this. So now for our image. When you do leaves, there's really, unless it's a definite leaf that you know has a shadow, you really can't go wrong. So what I'm going to do, and I'll do a couple of these and then I'll speed up the video, is right around my flowers, I know that I'm going to have shadow. Right around those flowers. I'm going to pull it out a little with my feathering. I think this leaf's going to have just a little more. So I'm going to go right along the edge and feather it out. So I know that leaf's going to have a little dark edge there. We'll do a little dark there. Flick it out. I think we want this bottom leaf darker here. And it's okay to leave little white spots because when you blend with your lighter color, it's just going to fill it in. So we'll do those 3. Apologies. I'm going to use my feather tip. On a larger image, I get better blending with my feather tip. So I'm going to go right into my halfway up. If you want, and you're not comfortable flicking, go right to the edge of where your dark feathers are and just do a little circle motion. Blend it in. See? And, okay. I will pause this and do a, oh, well, let me do a couple flowers for you. I think this first flower, I want to do, oh, if you don't love Blackberry Bliss. Is that what I got here? Yes, it is. Beautiful purple. And on this one, I had, if you look at the image, I had really light edges. And you can see my green went in here a little, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is just pick it up. And what I do when I'm doing that is I've touched that green to get rid of it, and I'm just wiping it off if there's any on my tip, just to keep your tips clean. So we're going to take our darkest, and we know that there's shadows right here around the edge of the inner part of the flower, so I color my edges and just feather it out a little bit. Color my edge. It's a little darker down here. I'm a feather tip person, so, but some of my students and a couple of my team seem to like to use the fine tip. So it's whatever you're comfortable with. I get a better feather effect if I use my feather tip, and that's all I'm doing right there. So I'm going to take and I'm going to pull out. We know we have a little bit there. There's no exact science because all that's going to blend in. A little bit of dark right there. Now we're going to take our light one, and I'm again using my feather. Do what you're comfortable with. So on this one, I'm going to start in the middle of it, and I'm going to run a little bit of circles here, just to blend that harsh line. Going almost all the way into it. You can go over the top of it. Your color is not going to go away. Your dark is not going to go away. So I'm just smoothing the edges of that. I'm going to drag a little bit out. And I'm doing the ends of these last, and I'll show you why. I'm just putting a little bit of color on them. Because I'm going to hurry up while it's still wet, and I'm going to hit the tips of these flowers with the blender while it's still wet. And it's going to pick it up just a little bit on the edges and give us that light, really light faded look. I'm going to take my fine tip now and just hit that very tip again with the fine tip. You can pull down into your color if you want. Just hit the edge. Gets rid of the harsh edge. And then give that a second, because you'll see that the color lifter will start to work fairly quickly. And as you're learning that, just experiment, okay? On my other one, I think I used the Highland leather. Oh my gosh, I have a horrible time saying that. The Highland Heather is what I used on the card you see in the photo. But I really wanted to try my Blackberry Bliss because it's like one of my favorite colors. On your yellows, that one's a... We're going to grab our light Daffodil Delight and our dark Daffodil Delight. And this one's just going to be the two colors. So we're going to go from our dark area. Let's go to your line, feather up, go here, feather up, take take your lighter one and just blend it. Go in circles, you can feather, you just want that edge blended. Go over the whole thing, keep it wet, and then take your blender and just hit those little edges. You'll see that it adds just a really nice touch to some of those flowers. I will speed up this video. For this part of my branch, I used Crumb Cake. Okay, now that our image is painted, what I like to do is I take the lightest blue I have in the blends, which is Light Pool Party. You can use a light gray, a light green, depending on what card you're doing, but I like to add a shadow. If you look at the image and then watch when you shadow it, so we know that it's dark back here. So I'm going to take my Pool Party and I'm going to just do a little bit. I know it's going to be shadowed back behind these flowers, so I'm just going to color this in. And then on your outside part of your images, now it's okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. I would try to get as close up to the edge as you can. And you'll see we're going to blend this. So it's all going to blend together. When you're doing your edges, just take your feather tip, go right along your edge. There's no exact science because we're going to blend that out so it doesn't have a harsh edge. And I just go around. Just creating your shadow of your sky. Now I know this is just needs to feather out just a little bit for when we blend. A real thin edge on here. have to be really precise because we're going to be blending it. And it'll get rid of the harsh edge. I mean, you could do it without blending it. It's with the light enough color to get in there where I had my shadows at. And you know your shadows are going to be a little darker, so you can just tap your pen to the edges of your darker spots. And just go around your leaf. Just feather out a couple of edges. Now take the feather edge of your blender, and I do this like in a circle. I just go right along my edge of that blue. Oh, I got red on there. What did I do? See, that's why I was saying wipe off before you put it back in your... I can get that off now. Well, I guess if I'm going to mess up, I'll do it on a live video. Why not? Or on a video. So I just take my blender and work these edges, just right along the edges. You just want to get it wet along the edges with your blender. I think my blender is getting dry. I think I have another one. Let me grab a blender. I always have more than one. So I'm going to just go right around these edges. And it's just going to give you a faded blue for your background. And don't forget, after you put the blender pen on it, give it a second. You'll see it starts to change. Okay, well, you know what? My bird's going to cover that little oops anyway. When in doubt, cover it. There's no right or wrong. And you know what? We're worst critics on ourselves. We see every mistake in our cards. And other people don't. Okay, unless they're a stamper, then they see it. But I don't know of anybody that's gonna go, oh my gosh, you really messed up. They're not gonna. So just have fun. Enjoy it. No stress. We stamp to get rid of stress. So what I did with this is this was a 3x4. And I did 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. I only wanted a really thin line. Let me back you back out of here so you can see what we're doing here. I'm a glue person. Oh, if you're doing your blends right, it's going to bleed through like this. So know that if you are doing an image directly on a card base, and you try to color an image, it's going to go through to the inside of your card. Doing this technique on Whisper White, Shimmer White is really nice. The colors blend really well. The thick white, it blends really well. So we're just going to mount. Oh. Use a little, get the goobers off I changed my glue holder, and it hasn't built up enough to get rid of my... You only need a little bit. It goes a long way. I usually just kind of make sure I've got a little dab on my corners because I don't want my corners to lift. Let's bring our little... Yes, this is my little hand glue holder. And I usually line up 2 corners, and then the rest is going to fall in place. I like using glue because then I can look at it, I can shift it a little bit with my fingers to make sure it's square and even. So now we got our base. And again, out of the magic of film, I've cut out our pieces that we colored earlier. Got our little flower. And we've got our picking up our dove. And so what I did to make my little butterfly, a three-dimensional little butterfly, is I took my snips and I cut out his wing. And then I took a glue dot and I put it right at the edge of his wing there. And I also, because I didn't want the wing to collapse, you know, when you put it in an envelope or you mail it, I took the very edge of my dimensionals and just cut a really, you don't need a big piece. I guess I'm having a little issue here. Just cut a real small little piece. Where's my tweezers? Well, my tweezers aren't here, so we're going to use my knife. And you end up with a, okay, make me a liar, really small little piece of dimensional. And all I'm going to do is place that right by the glue dot. And then you got to, of course, get that tiny little piece of paper off there. And when I stick his wing on there, I'm going to line up his wing, put the edge, I should have zoomed in for you. I'm just going to put the edge right there. And when you glue down the edge and push it down, you've got a dimensional keeping it from closing. And I just kind of bent it up a little bit. There you go. So that way you have a little dimensional or 3D butterfly. And because I'm a shimmer girl, we are going to add some Wink Stella to our little butterfly. I should have done the inside before I glued him. It's all easy, all good. And this little guy, we're just going to glue down a couple little dots of glue. And again, I use glue because I can move it if I need to. So I think I want him about up here in the corner. Pin down his bottom wing. Give him a little dimension there. And we have our dove. And again, but with the Wink Stella on him, all I'm going to do is hit his gray areas just a little bit. And know that when you use Wink of Stella, because there is alcohol in here, it will actually help blend. So remember that if you're doing something and you don't want your ink color to change. Or wait until your blends or your image is dry, and then it's not really going to affect it. So I'm just hitting the edges of his wings. Then of course, we're going to put some dimensionals on him. And because I don't want his tail to collapse, I'm just going to grab a little piece of dimensional here. I just trim my edges. I use every bit of my dimensionals. And I'm going to put it right there. You know, if you use the picker tool, I don't know if you guys have seen it, the new Take Your Pick tool. This little flat piece that comes on here is excellent for flipping those off. Or it's got a poker tool in the other side. If you don't have this tool, it's in my store listed below. It's a must. There's even another fitting that can go on this. I've got it put away. And then you've got your standard little, it's got a little, it's kind of like a sticky for picking up dimensionals. So we're going to take our little dove. And you know what? I kind of want him. He's going to go off the edge a little. And now I don't build this onto my card base until this part is done. I don't want to ruin my card base. I also am one that I will stamp my greeting on the inside before I assemble my card. One, if I mess up the greeting, oh, now I got to cut the card apart because I've already got it together. That's just how I roll. So we're just going to put our little dove going off the page here a little. And then we've got our flower. And you know what? The die cuts work great. I like mine a little bit closer sometimes because I don't want all that white to hide what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to trim it up a little bit. You don't have to. This is just my little preference. And I'm going to pop that up with dimensionals. Probably could get away with one, but I'm going to do two. The card I made, the person I made this card for, I don't want it to be destroyed in the mail. So, I think I want it to be a little bit off my paper, but not hide my yellow flower. So we'll just put it right there. For the greeting, you could stamp a greeting in here. You could, anything you want to put in there. Die cut a happy birthday. The for you that I used in the image, I wish I knew where I got it. I'm not positive if it's even a Stampin' Up old die. I mean, I've had it forever, and I just like the saying, and I like the script. I'll show you the die if you think, but there's no names on it. But that's the one we're using here. So when I'm using, making a workspace mess here. Okay, let me grab my tweezers. So when I'm doing a real small die cut, like I said, I'm still a glue person. You could use the fine tip glue pen too if you want. I just usually take a little bit, hit the key areas, just dot it on there. You can also take and put glue on a Stampin' sponge and dab it, whatever you'd like. This way I seem to have more control and I don't get glue all over my project. So I think we want this little 4. Let's put it about right there. Tap it down. I'll do a little U. I'm just going to take, if I got too big a glue dot, I just don't squeeze again and I grab from that. Dab my edges. Oh, stick it to my glue. You don't need a lot. Little goes a real long way. So let's put this U. Let's see. Do we want it? Let's just put it close to here. Tap it down. And there you go. Since I already had a lot of dimensionals on this. Oops. My card base. Oh, there's my card base. Sorry. So we're going to take our card base. It's folded. And I've got the nice impression. And then here's the more subtle impression of your emboss. You can use either one. It can go either way. Head over. And there you go. I did do the envelope. If you are going to color on your envelope, stamp your image, and remember that your alcohol markers could come through the other side. This envelope is actually one that was in the last paper pumpkin. So if you decide you want to color your image with an alcohol marker, what I would suggest doing is stamp your image in your memento and take a piece of scrap white and tuck it in behind where you're going to be coloring your image. That way it won't bleed all the way through your cardstock. If you do an image on the inside of the card here, like I would probably do either the little flower maybe just right here in the corner with your greeting. I would do my greeting in black. I would use your regular Stampin' Right markers here because that's going to bleed through to the back. So always remember that when you use the Stampin' Blends, they will bleed through your paper, and that is what they're supposed to do. I hope this helped, and everybody have a fabulous day. And to the wonderful lady receiving this card, know that I think you're the greatest. Have a wonderful day. Happy birthday.